and a few around Queenstown. Who are they? Where are they from, Sophia?
Well, I think they're really coming from everywhere, but I mean, from the US, I think particularly you have a lot of people coming here due to the increased uncertainty globally, and it just makes New Zealand a really attractive safe haven, and we've got extremely nice, clean and crisp air and nature that's really accessible and uncrowded, together with top world-class service and food and wine and lodges. So,
and all this started before Donald Trump became president, didn't it?
Yeah, I think it's before the Trump effect. It started before.
How is the wealth manifest? I mean, what are they doing and buying, etc., Sophia?
Well, I think a lot of them are coming in looking for, because they don't come really to get international brands, so they don't, I haven't experienced at least. I mean, from a Helitrans perspective, they come in to see New Zealand, and New Zealand, when they're buying, it's a New Zealand-made product. Like we have Member Coast, New Zealand. We've got beautiful outdoor furniture and bean bags. So it's not necessarily the luxury, high-end goods like that people might go and buy in Hong Kong or when they travel to Japan. And then I think, again, it's experiences. They're after bespoke experiences. Or playing golf at somewhere like Cape Kidnappers or visiting Waiheke. So that's, I think, growing, and that is what makes New Zealand very attractive.
How many people would take a helicopter to the airport? I mean, you would think by the time you got to the helicopter it might be quicker to drive to the airport. It's intriguing, isn't it? I mean, do many people do that? Do many people actually do that?
Yes, there are many people that do that. I mean, if you say that you're travelling business class or first class, and you can take a helicopter, and especially if you live, say, at Waiheke, it's a 12-minute helicopter ride, and it's probably 2 hours plus, depending on traffic, to get to the airport. And it's really from, I mean, if you go as a family, it's from $250 per person. So it's not, I'm not saying it's cheap, but it's not unachievable, even if you're not super wealthy.
Can I tell you a story about my one experience with an enormously wealthy person?
Sophia might know that.
She might well know that person. This person said, "We would like to invite you to come and have lunch on our yacht." I'm not going to say who the person is. And I said, "Well, that'd be very nice." And we were living at Waiheke at the time. And he said, "I'll send a tender, I think they call it, to pick you up." So this was lovely. So we went down and on the beach and whatever, and this tender arrived and picked us up and took us out to this luxury yacht, which was really, really beautiful and had lots of rooms, and the most extraordinarily beautiful young woman who was the chef. And we were served this magnificent lunch. It was absolutely fabulous, and I'd never come across anything like that before. A wonderful, wonderful time. And at the end of it, the very wealthy man said to me, "I really need your help." You know, he said, "I have a problem." He said, "I've got all this money, and I really don't know how to spend it." And I said to him, "You should go to Fair Go." That was the story.
You should go to Fair Go?
He should go to Fair Go because he had a complaint. He had millions of dollars and he couldn't find anywhere to spend it.
I gotcha.
He needed to go to Fair Go.
Oh, I can think of something a little more constructive you could have said.
What? No, you can.
I would have given him a list of worthy recipients.
Sophia Ambler, thank you. Thank you for joining us from the Luxury Network. Thank you also, Brian Edwards and Michelle Bogue from the network underneath Luxury a wee bit.
The
That's
Luxury
right,
Network.
significantly underneath.
Thank you, everybody. We're back tomorrow with the panel.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint, as their eggs are removed from supermarket shelves, Palace Poultry breaks their silence. Can it be guaranteed the eggs on our supermarket shelves sold as free range are actually that? Palace's owner Terry Fletcher is adamant he did not on-sell caged eggs as free range. He joins us, as does egg supplier Robert Herewith. We also hear from Mainland Poultry, who own the Woodland brand, and the Egg Producers Federation and Countdown. Also tonight, the water petition. Coral Allen Burrows' murderer gets more jail time. And should New Zealand follow Australia's lead and ban unvaccinated children from childcare centres and preschools? Coming up after the news at 5.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batten aho. Hundreds of people have been evacuated from buildings in central Wellington, and the Army bomb disposal team has carried out 3 controlled explosions after a suspicious package was found. The item was left in the foyer of the Central Police Station in Victoria Street. Our reporter at the scene says 2 initial explosions were followed by a third one about 15 minutes ago. Cordons are in place as a precaution, and the police are advising people to avoid the area. Victoria Street is closed. One lane on Willis Street nearby is also closed while repairs are being done on a trolley bus damaged in a truck crash this morning. Motorists are being advised there will be delays. A Bay of Plenty town on one of the country's most dangerous roads will finally get a bypass. Angry locals in Katikati demanded the bypass be created after 5 Tongan men were killed in a crash on the stretch of State Highway 2 in August last year. The bypass will be part of the government's $520 million Waihi to Tauranga program. The Transport Minister, Simon Bridges, says the road will improve safety and increase economic growth in the region. Countdown Supermarket says it will hire an independent body to trace where its eggs products come from. The chain pulled Palace Poultry eggs from its shelves yesterday after an investigation by the new website Newsroom concluded that millions of the brand's eggs sold before the shear were probably cage-laid, not free-range. The spokesperson for Countdown, James Walker, says the supermarket found out about the allegations against Palace Poultry yesterday. Another supplier, Mainland Poultry, which owns Woodland Eggs, has also been embroiled in the investigation after supplementing its stock with Palace Poultry eggs. Mr Walker says all Countdown egg suppliers will be checked.
We're sending out assure quality experts to each of our suppliers, whether they supply our branded product or our own brand product, to look at their supply chains and ensure that they can validate that the eggs are free range from the farm through to the customer.
Countdown spokesperson James Walker. A 15,000-strong petition has been presented to opposition MPs on the steps of Parliament this afternoon, calling for a ban on exports of bottled water. The Bung the Boar campaign began when the Ashburton District Council tried to sell land with a water consent to a bottled water company. Its spokesperson Jen Brunier travelled the length of the South Island gathering signatures to add to those made online. She says the petition calls for a moratorium on water being bottled and exported overseas until restrictions are put in place.
Water bottlers can come here and apply for a reasonably cheap consent to take our groundwater, and our councils are granting those. Billions of litres of our water are being taken away, and we get no recompense for that.
Jen Brunier. The Environment Minister, Nick Smith, says the water taken from aquifers for bottling represents a tiny fraction of the total amount extracted for tap water and irrigation. Aucklanders have slipped in their efforts to temporarily cut water consumption, but are still being told it's a good result. The city is having to cut use to below 400 million litres a day, but yesterday rebounded to 419. Our Auckland correspondent Todd Nile reports.
The city's water supply's been reduced after landslips during heavy rain contaminated the biggest storage lakes. The biggest single treatment plant at Ardmore is running at half capacity while sediment settles. The council company Watercare says the real savings target is reset every day, with the main goal being to fill the city's reservoirs each night. The chief executive, Ravin Jadaram, insists the public message is still clear and savings will be needed for several more weeks. Itamaki Makoro, ko Todd Nile tēnei.
Treaty negotiations will soon start for Mount Taranaki. Ngā iwi o Taranaki, which represents 8 tribes of the Taranaki area, has signed terms of negotiations with the Crown. The iwi lead negotiator, Jamie Tuta, says their claims are the most severe in the country, reflecting wholesale confiscation of their lands. At the heart of their grievance is their ancestral mountain, Taranaki. Iwi negotiators and the Crown are working towards reaching an agreement in principle by August. It's 4.5 minutes past 5. To sport, the England rugby coach Eddie Jones has compared the praise his side have received from his All Black counterpart Steve Hansen to the fairy tale of Little Red Riding Hood being deceived by the wolf. Steve Hansen has congratulated the Six Nations champions for retaining their title by beating Scotland at the weekend and equalling the All Blacks' record of 18 successive Test wins. But Jones is having none of it.
Hearing Steve Hansen make comments reminds me of the, Little Red Riding Hood and the grandma and the wolf dressed up as a grandmother. Yeah, you've always got to be careful of compliments, particularly from an All Black coach.
Eddie Jones. The head of the New Zealand Olympic Committee is denying the Commonwealth Games movement is in crisis after Durban was stripped of its 2022 hosting rights. The South African city failed to meet its financial and other key commitments to the Commonwealth Games Federation. Karen Smith, who's also a member of the Federation's executive, says they urgently need to find a replacement city.
It's not ideal. It's a situation we find ourselves in, and we need to find a very swift solution. But it's better than proceeding with a Games that cannot be successful. There's not a shortage of cities who can do this, have indicated their ability and willingness to do so.
Karen Smith. New Zealand rally driver Hayden Paddon has cut ties with his longtime co-driver John Campbell. The pair have worked together since 2005. Campbell's last time in the passenger's seat will be at Rally Finland in July. That's the news.
Keeping our water clean.
When our rivers are becoming increasingly degraded, that water is undrinkable.
Turning off the taps.
Generally, we can trust the tap water, and we're able to turn it on and we don't even think about it. It's fresh, it's clean and it's safe.
Meth in the water.
These are drugs of dependence. You can get addicted to these drugs. It's a very Moorish drug and people binge on it.
One of life's addictions. Susie Ferguson and Guy Aspinall, Morning Reports, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, as fresh water comes under increasing pressure, does farming in New Zealand need a rethink? Agribusiness consultant Alison Dews and Landcorp Chief Executive Steve Cardin discuss rational water use. And after 10, Rachel Priestley, the Wairarapa-based chef, restaurateur and producer of Italian cured meats using local pigs. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met surface weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Kapiti, also Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty in the central high country. Cloudy periods and a few showers, becoming fine this evening or tomorrow morning. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy with showers, becoming isolated tomorrow evening. Wellington and Wairarapa, cloudy periods and a few showers, clearing tomorrow afternoon. Bulla Nelson and Marlborough, except the Kaikoura coast, cloudy periods and isolated showers, becoming fine this afternoon. Westland and Fiordland, mostly fine. The Kaikoura coast and Canterbury, cloudy and a few showers, becoming fine tomorrow morning. Otago and Southland, cloudy periods and isolated coastal showers, but it's becoming fine tomorrow morning. And the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, a few showers, clearing tomorrow morning. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much, Katrina. Coming up, eggs, cage, free range, who sold what, who knew what, and what you can know as a consumer. But first, and if you're trying to drive near the Wellington CBD, you may be listening to this in a stationary car or bus. We go to Victoria Street in the very centre of Wellington. Buildings around the Central Police Station have been evacuated. The police station itself has been evacuated, and Victoria Street has been closed after the discovery of a suspicious item. Cordons are in place and people have been advised to stay away. The police have already carried out a series of controlled explosions, 3 of them. We understand our reporter Emile Donovan is at the scene. Hi Emile, what can you tell us?
Hi there, John. I'm standing at the moment at the corner of Williston Street and Victoria Street. Basically, we got a call at about 4 o'clock saying that the Central Police Station had been evacuated. It turns out it's due to a suspicious package that was found in the foyer of the Central Police Station on Victoria Street. Victoria Street's been cordoned off from Williston Street up to about Wakefield Street. However, some people are being let back into their buildings now, including the BNZ building. So after the explosions, the controlled explosions rather, took place, it seems as though normality is starting to return now.
Yes, by golly, that's an important street in rush hour, so there will be traffic chaos around you, Emile.
There is quite a bit of traffic chaos at the moment, John, and it's compounded by the fact that Willis Street is down to 2 lanes rather than its normal 3 after a truck crashed earlier on in the day. So there is quite a lot of disturbance from the traffic perspective at the moment.
Okay, just see a police officer walking behind you, and she appears, Emile, to be removing. Is she doing that? Can you look around? Is she removing the tape that's blocking Victoria Street off? Or she's just letting it, so traffic's now going through, is it?
Not at the moment. News, John. Traffic is going through the cordon at the moment, and a police officer is holding up some of the cordon tape, but I can't definitively say that the cordon's coming up at the moment.
Thanks, Amir. We really appreciate it. And we're trying to find out exactly what happened with that parcel and what, if anyone knows, was in it. It certainly has been blown up, though. We will go back once we have more from the police. So the situation does seem to be coming to an end, but Victoria Street is, at this stage, still closed. We turn now to eggs, free-range eggs, for which, of course, the consumer pays more. Since Newsroom broke the story yesterday, reporting that millions of cage eggs have been sold as free-range, we've learnt the Serious Fraud Office has been investigating what's been going on. We've once again heard calls for government regulation of the free-range egg industry. That point is big picture, and we talked to the Egg Producers Federation at length later in Checkpoint about the guarantees they can give that free-range eggs are free-range eggs. But we begin with a specific case, a reminder that no charges have been laid. At issue, as revealed by Newsroom, was cage eggs being sold as free-range. Palace Poultry does farm free-range eggs, but when demand exceeds their own ability to supply, they buy more in. At least they say they were free-range. One of their suppliers insists they weren't. They were cage. He sold them as cage, and they were never sold as free-range. I spoke to Robert Hareworth about whom he dealt with. Did he supply eggs direct to Palace Poultry?
No. We supplied eggs to TK Produce Supplies.
And who owns them?
I don't know. So we always did business with a gentleman called TK. And he had a staff member that he assigned to us, or, that we were in contact with, and his name was Stu. And he took care of the requirements that he had, the product that he needed, and he came and picked up the product.
And what were they picking up?
They were picking up a variety of grades, but all cage eggs. So size 5 cage eggs, size 6 cage eggs, size 7 cage eggs.
Right, I need to be really clear around this, and I want you to be as clear as you possibly can be. You were selling cage eggs as cage eggs.
That's correct.
Did you ever sell free-range eggs to Stu?
Never. Or Tom said that he maybe purchased one tray of free-range for his own use at one point.
Right, the sort of tray you take home to do the baking with or whatever.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
Did you ever...
He never, ever sold free-range eggs to these people.
Right.
Never.
Robert, did you ever pass off cage eggs as free-range eggs?
No, we never did.
Did the documentation always say cage eggs?
Yes. Always.
So what do you think of what's happened over the past few days?
It is, we feel betrayed, and if these allegations are true, then this man or these people have, doing a disgrace to everybody in the poultry industry, because the poultry industry in New Zealand is not a large industry. And I believe that most people who are within this industry are interior in what they are doing. And by what is happening at the moment, if this is true, then he's doing everybody a dishonor to everybody involved in this business.
And you used a very key phrase there, if this is true, and we absolutely have to say on the record that no charges have been laid and certainly nobody has been found guilty of anything. When did you know that an investigation was underway?
In the beginning of December.
Last year?
Last year, yeah.
And who came to you at that time?
The Serious Fraud Office.
And they said they were investigating the passing off as cage eggs?
No.
What did they say?
They said that they served notice on us, on me and on our staff member in regards to the business of Aaron and Terry Fletcher. And they have never disclosed to us what they were investigating.
So did they take paperwork from you, Robert?
That's correct.
And the paperwork would have shown that you sold them cage eggs.
That's correct.
And the Serious Fraud Office removed that from you in December.
That's correct. And subsequently, we stopped doing business. Yeah.
You stopped selling to the man stew.
That's correct.
Robert, there's no possibility that the eggs you were selling that were caged eggs were mistakenly put in free-range packets, is there?
Not by us, no.
Right. So
no, absolutely. I saw this clip as well, of course, yesterday, and the fact that this man is saying to this reporter that, "Oh no, we bought those as free-range eggs," it's just a blatant lie. It's just the biggest. That he actually can say that straight to somebody's face just makes me cringe.
Robert, you mentioned at the beginning of the interview, so you did most of the business with Stu, but at the beginning of the interview you mentioned a man called TK who established contact, introduced you to Stu, and Stu did the business with you. Do you know who TK is?
No, I do, but not, But then, when he just first started, back in the days at Vaccination, he introduced himself as a supplier of produce in the lower North Island and the top of the South Island. And he, many veggie shops or dairy owners came to our premises in Vaccination and picked up caged eggs, even then, and paid for them, and then came back the week later, and that's how this business slowly grew. Yeah?
And who was TK? Who is TK?
Yeah, in our view, he was a man that ran a produce company. He was, he made comments to us that he had to pick up the product today because it needed to go down the line, and otherwise we missed the boat to the South Island.
Right. Sorry, forgive me, Robert, but do you know who TK is?
No, well, like I said, I do not know. I do not know, except for the fact that he is a person that came to us as owning a produce wholesaling company.
So that's Robert Heheworth, who was supplying eggs to Palace. He absolutely insists he told them they were caged. Palace respond in a moment and they say, no, we believed in good faith they were free range. We'll hear from Palace shortly, but first, Mainland Poultry, who own woodland free range eggs. Now, the vast majority of the eggs they sell are their own and are from their own free range farms, but they did source some extra eggs from Palace Poultry. Its CEO, Michael Guthrie, says he had no misgivings about the extra eggs supplied to him by Palace until he was contacted by the Serious Fraud Office, exactly as Robert just described. He immediately cancelled his contract with Palace. Michael Guthrie from Mainland Poultry, who owns Woodland Eggs, spoke to us earlier.
I've got to be quite blunt here. We're victim of a very deliberate fraud scam. We have our own people and your reporter on Campbell Live would have seen that we have people who go and audit any suppliers to us. We audit our own farms. Now that's internally. We also, so they went to Palace as they go to these other farms. There was nothing that we saw untoward. They signed. They also have to give us copies of their risk management programs, which are audited by MPI. So that is absolutely a must that we carry a copy of that. And then we've got a declaration from them saying they were selling us free-range eggs. So we were going to get duped here by someone who uses a different name, buys through a middle entity, not even an egg farmer. They're going through a distributor. The person evidently used a different name for himself. We've been caught in a most elaborate scam, and we're paying for it.
Yeah, I guess we don't know that yet, do we? Because you know, innocent until proven guilty. So the investigation, the investigation is still proceeding. No charges have been laid, and of course, no one has been found guilty of anything. What did the SFO state to you as fact that you were being sold eggs that weren't free range? Was that stated as fact, or did they just say they were having an investigation into the possibility of that?
Yes, they said that they were conducting an investigation.
Okay. So
into fraudulent practices, I think was the word they used. I can't remember.
Okay. What needs to happen now to make sure that the eggs that we believe, that you believe are free range, are in fact free range? How do we get certainty around that?
Right. As a company, we are going to, and we've been working on this for quite some time, and we've been trying to get the whole industry to do this, is to move to stamping the eggs at source.
Well, you've been trying to get the whole industry to do this, Michael.
Yes, we have.
So you want to stamp at source?
Absolutely.
And there is reluctance from the industry, is there?
No, I think it's just not as easy as it sounds. You know, you've got to have special sort of equipment, and you know, for some of these small guys, it's a big outlay, and you know, if they feel aggrieved by all of this, I don't blame them. And we're trying to work out a way how we can get, you know, we can't make it mandatory, but we want to see that happen. We're definitely going to do it. Come hell or high water now. We're not going to wait for anybody else to do it. This is the worst day of my business life, John.
That's Michael Guthrie from Mainland Poultry, who own Woodland free-range eggs. Now, Michael Brooks is the CEO of the Egg Producers Federation. He says the industry feels betrayed and egg stamping at source may be the best answer, so every egg wears its provenance. More on that later, but first, how can consumers be sure that free-range eggs are free-range eggs? What systems are in place to guarantee that?
We trialled the extra audit processes. Clearly, as this case would seem to show, if a determined individual wants to subvert a system, then that can be done. So we've looked at the options, and egg stamping is the one that we're
so for someone sitting in their car tonight listening to this, or at home who's just about to crack an egg and cook it for their evening dinner, for whatever, whether they're putting it in baking or whatever they're making, how do you absolutely guarantee that the free-range egg you've purchased is free-range?
Well, we have just got to put as many systems in place that will prevent a lone individual, 1 out of 126 farmers, from doing something that subverts the system.
Okay, sorry, can you answer my question though, Michael? I'm so sorry to be insistent. How can you guarantee that the free-range egg you've purchased, which you paid extra money for, is actually free-range?
Well, can you prove anything is 100%? What we can do is that we have on-farm audits through the Ministry for Primary Industries.
Right, so you can't, so at the moment, sorry Michael, at the moment your industry and your producers are saying that you can't, as a consumer, you can't be guaranteed that the egg you're purchasing as free range is in fact free range.
We're taking every possible step to do it, but if an individual in this case wants to subvert the system, we can only, we can just continue to look at every option to try and prevent that from happening. I can say to your listeners that we work extremely hard on this. This is a case where wherever we hear of any suggestion of wrongdoing, we take all possible steps for checks to be made.
That's Michael Brooks, the CEO of the Egg Producers Federation. Now, we will hear much more from him about egg stamping and guarantees and what is going on in the free-range business later in Checkpoint. But let's go to TK. We heard about him earlier, Terry Fletcher from Palace Poultry. With Palace under investigation by the Serious Fraud Office, he's waiting before he speaks at length, but he wanted to read out a statement on air. He did so, and we kept talking after that.
I'd like to refute all the allegations against Palace Poultry selling cage eggs as free range. We've only ever bought and purchased free range to make up the shortfall of the free range market and to meet their requirements. I'm working to clear my family known of all wrongdoing, and until the investigations are complete, I can't elaborate too much further. We've only ever supplied free range eggs and have done so over the past 25 years. We continue to supply free range eggs to the marketplace. That's about where we are at the moment. There's obviously a few questions you'd like to ask me there.
I think the most important question is, Did you knowingly pass off cage eggs as free range?
No.
Did you buy cage eggs and then sell them as free range?
We did not. We've got photos of the product being picked up in free-range wrappers and bits and pieces, and we're led to believe by this turkey that's what we were purchasing, and we on-sold them in good faith, and now it's turned around and bit us in the arse.
This man has told us very explicitly, absolutely explicitly, that he was selling you cage eggs.
He's a liar. As I've said, he doesn't know me, doesn't know... He knows me well. He's known me for about 20 years, and I just can't believe that he says he has never heard my name before. That is an absolute crock of bullshit.
Okay.
He's printed invoices out there which have hit the media, which are on the newsroom and bits and pieces. We've never seen the goddamn invoices. It's the first time it's ever surfaced.
So do you have invoices from him saying free-range eggs?
No, we don't. He invoices all his product as eggs, pellet 7, pellet 6s, jumbo, whatever he puts on them. That's how he does it. He issues a supplier number, what he writes down. We don't know where they come from, and that is for traceability. That's about all we've got that we have to relinquish. You know what's there.
So you were selling them as free-range eggs, in good faith.
In good faith.
Where were they from?
We don't know. Well, we can't disclose his name, but yes, from the person we purchased them from. He supplied our product for us for quite a number of years, as did other people.
So Terry, forgive me, but you were buying free-range eggs from this man for quite a number of years, and you didn't know where they were from?
Nobody actually knows where your product comes from because all they do is they put a supplier number on your invoice.
Okay, so what was the supplier number, and were they a free-range farmer?
Well, John, we don't know. We don't know who, what, or where they actually come from. He supplies them, supplies the product, and what he does is he writes a supplier number from 1 to 10 on our invoice, and if ever there is a problem, like the eggs are very dirty and bits and pieces because they haven't been cleaned and we have to go through and clean them, then we go back to him and we say, hey, we've got a problem with supplier number so-and-so, and he goes, oh, right, leave it with me, I'll deal with it. And that's about where it ends up.
What price were you paying for the eggs? Were you paying a cage egg price or a free-range price?
Well, we pay on the $8 market around the thing, and we're paying $7.75, and then we had to go in and clean and do and re-rate the product.
Right, so is that a cage egg price or a free-range price?
No, that's a free-range price. So cage bird prices for them was around about $6 or something, and we were up around the $7.75.
And in all the years, how many years did you buy eggs from this man for?
Probably about 6 or 7.
And in all those years, you never once said, hey, what free-range supplier are they coming from?
He won't disclose it because then we go to everybody that does this stuff and buy them, not just us that buy product.
Right. There is a serious fraud office investigation taking place, isn't there, into you,
Correct.
into your practices?
Correct.
And what do you believe they are looking at?
Oh, well, just what the issue that's been brought up now.
So the passing off of caged eggs as free-range eggs?
Correct.
That's what they're investigating, whether or not you did that?
Yep, correct.
And you are saying very explicitly, whilst that investigation is going on, that you didn't?
Correct.
Not once?
We can't, no, not once. Outside of our conscience, we are clear. We've bought the product in good faith and we've sold the product in good faith. We've got invoices, like I'm trying to say to you, that this man has concocted out of thin air for some reason that we've never seen, which puts a very bad light on our business.
Are you accusing your supplier of inventing invoices after the fact?
Well, we have never seen them, John. We've never ever had an invoice that's on the newsroom we've got on the social media. We have never seen the goddamn invoice. We supplied our invoices to SFO. They are nothing like this one that surfaced. Where the bloody hell's this come from?
Terry, look, I know you are hamstrung by the investigation, and also it's a terrible line. So I want to end with a very simple, clear, and explicit question to which you can give an absolutely straight answer. Did you knowingly purchase cage eggs and on-sell them as free range?
We did not.
That's Palace Poultry owner Terry Fletcher, and after 6 tonight we'll hear from Countdown spokesperson James Walker about the implications of pulling the Palace Poultry eggs from its shelves, and we'll hear more from the industry about the big picture. How do you know free-range eggs are free-range eggs? Coming up on Checkpoint, the man who murdered his 6-year-old stepdaughter, Coral Ellen Burrows, doesn't ever want to get out of prison, he says, as he's back being sentenced for an attempted murder. A petition is presented to Parliament calling for exports of New Zealand drinking water to be stopped, and an Otago professor warns much of South Dunedin could be underwater and uninhabitable within 17 years. Speaking of water, more on Auckland's water. We have Nona with business news, but before all of that, Katrina Batten with the headlines.
Cordons have been removed from around buildings evacuated in central Wellington after a suspicious package was left in the foyer of the central police station. Hundreds of people were earlier evacuated from surrounding buildings, and the Army bomb disposal team carried out 3 controlled explosions shortly before 5 o'clock. Victoria Street was also closed. Countdown Supermarket says it will hire an independent body to trace where its egg products come from. The chain pulled Palace Poultry eggs from its shelves yesterday after an investigation by the new website Newsroom concluded that millions of the brand's eggs sold before this year were probably cage-laid, not free-range. Palace Poultry owner Terry Fletcher told Checkpoint the company had purchased the eggs in good faith. A Bay of Plenty town on one of the country's most dangerous roads will finally get a bypass. Angry locals in Katikati demanded the bypass be created after 5 Tongan men were killed in a crash on the stretch of State Highway 2 in August last year. The bypass will be part of the government's $520 million Waihi to Tauranga program. A 15,000-strong petition has been presented to opposition MPs on the steps of Parliament this afternoon, calling for a ban on exports of bottled water. The Bung the Bore campaign began when the Ashburton District Council tried to sell land with a water consent to a bottled water company. Aucklanders have slipped in their efforts to temporarily cut water consumption, but are still being told it's a good result. The city is having to cut use to below 400 million litres a day, but yesterday rebounded to 419. A fast-moving winter storm bringing up to 60 centimetres of snow is expected to hit the northeastern United States. Some 50 million people along the eastern seaboard are now under storm or blizzard warnings. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6.
Thanks, Katrina. Let's turn to business news now with Nona Peltier sitting beside me in the Auckland studio. Time's fairly tough for some retailers, yet Briscoe's Group delivered on forecast with another record profit on the back of improved sales and profit margins. I'm just reading this out. You wrote this, Nona. Elaborate. How's it doing that?
I spoke with Rod Duke. Rod Duke is, he must be kind of some sort of a wizard because he managed to increase his net profit, that's bottom line profit, by 26%. Now, of course, there was a couple of one-time items in there with the sale of property and so on, but really that's a stellar result. And so they made a profit of $59.4 million, which is a lot of money considering, it is quite competitive out there. We've heard from the warehouse recently. We've had stories, quite a lot of information about why New Zealanders are buying online, the growing percentage there. Like, for example, a lot of New Zealanders are visiting international websites because they want to get a better price and because they can't find what they're looking for. Rod Duke says, it's true that perhaps in the fashion industry, shoes, these kinds of things, but when it comes to household items And sporting gear, no, they are going to Rebel Sport and they are going to Briscoe's Homeware. So yeah, and it's there. And the reason that they're getting very good margins, he thinks, is because he's pretty much a hands-on kind of guy. Like, this is his business. He owns a majority stake of this company, and his staff actually go out and negotiate directly with the brand owners to get the best prices they can. So that's probably what's reflected there.
I'm just so overwhelmingly tempted to sing the jingle. No. But we're not going to.
I'm sorry, I don't sing.
Okay,
I'm not
brilliant.
here to sing, no.
MasterCard's
no
index of consumer confidence shows confidence is at its highest level in 3 years.
Yeah, there you go.
Did they? I mean, MasterCard want consumer confidence to be high, right? Because then people use their credit cards. So let's set that aside.
Well,
what's their evidence? What's?
Well, they do an index, they do a survey, of I think a couple thousand consumers. I don't actually have how many they've done, but a number. And so that's risen by 6.8 points. That's on an index to 62.2 points. Now, you might think, well, what's 62.2? Well, actually, a neutral number is 50. And so 62.2 is quite high. And when you compare it to Australia, same, time frame and so on, 46.5.
Gosh, so what's behind the confidence here? Does
anyone
answer that question?
Yeah, they rate people according to, what kinds of things are making them feel confident. The economy, employment opportunities, income potential growth, the value of the stock market, and the quality of life. So I guess New Zealanders are having a pretty good time. And
well, maybe New Zealanders with MasterCards are having a pretty good time, right?
I'm not sure if it was just the MasterCard
I mean, this
customers.
is the fascinating thing, isn't it? That we keep hearing stories about people who are having the contrary of a good time.
Well, I guess some people are. I mean, look at the housing prices. If you're a homeowner and your house prices increase so much and you've got all this extra equity, you might feel very wealthy and not so much if you're, not on the rent.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we don't know that. They didn't sort of specify whether these were homeowners or not.
Right.
But certainly the people who are shopping at Briscoe are probably buying for their home. Anyway, so what did the markets do here? Oh yeah, so our dollar was steady at 69.2 US cents, 91.5 Australian, 56.7 pence, and you won't expect very much change before the US Federal Reserve makes a decision on interest rates, expected to go up at last. Again, the NZX Top 50 Index, it fell 1/4%, down 18 points to 7,177, and Briscoe's share price was pretty much steady, up a cent, $4.40.
Nona Peltier, thank you very much indeed. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Thank you for being with us. It's 23 to 6. The man who murdered his 6-year-old stepdaughter, Coral Ellen Burrows, doesn't ever, he says, want to get out of prison. And today the possibility of Stephen Roger Williams being released became very remote when he was sentenced to preventative detention. The 42-year-old was already serving a sentence of life with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years inside Auckland's maximum security prison at Paramoremo. It was there he lured a fellow prisoner into his cell and stabbed him in the neck. His intention was to kill. Our court reporter Edward Gay filed this report.
The Crown Prosecutor Scott McColgan said Williams believed fellow inmate and killer Nicky Roper was a snitch. Williams gained the trust of Roper by tattooing him. He planned the attack for months. One day in December last year, he lured Roper to his cell out of the gaze of the CCTV cameras under the guise of more tattooing.
Mr. Williams used 2 fluorescent light tubes to stab the victim twice in the neck prior to putting him in a chokehold. He then stomped on his head and attacked the victim with a broom. Once that broom broke, he then attempted to stab the victim in the neck with the broken point of that broom.
Mr. McColgan said Williams had 96 previous convictions, 16 of them for violence. Williams told authorities he intended to keep harming people until he got the sentence he deserved for the murder of Coral Ellen Burrows in 2003. Justice Toogood said Williams, who declined a lawyer and legal advice, had a violent childhood with a history of substance abuse that began when he was just 10 years old.
You have a history of substance abuse for which you have never received proper treatment. A methamphetamine binge featured prominently in the terrible killing of your stepdaughter. Your use of methamphetamine has severely impaired your ability to maintain relationships. It has alienated those close to you, and I do not doubt that it has contributed to an escalation in your violent behaviour.
Williams also has a conviction for stabbing a fellow prisoner in the neck with a sharpened toothbrush. Justice Toogood said Williams' attack on Roper left him with a 30-centimetre gash in his neck, requiring 34 staples and a broken eye socket.
You admitted planning the attack for months, making it clear that you intended to kill Mr. Roper, and you said you could not believe he was still alive. Indeed, you expressed regret and disappointment that he did not die.
Justice Toogood said violence had become the norm for Williams and he'd become institutionalised.
In your interview with the probation officer, you took some delight in describing yourself as the smiling assassin, meaning that your future victims would not be aware of your intent to harm them until it happens.
The judge said Williams had a high risk of reoffending and was a disturbed individual.
You have been unable to persevere with counselling for post-traumatic stress disorder following the murder of your stepdaughter. I accept that you feel a considerable level of guilt for that offending and that you have a desire to punish yourself by remaining in prison for the rest of your life.
Justice Toogood said Williams had told authorities that he intended to kill again so he could remain in prison.
I have to tell you, Mr. Williams, you do not need to do that to achieve your objective of remaining incarcerated. The sentence of preventive detention, which I find must be imposed, means that you will never be released until you are no longer a threat to community safety.
There was little reaction from Williams to the sentence. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi ko Edward Gaiaho.
90 minutes to 6, let's turn to water now. A couple of stories on it, although they're quite different. A symbolic last remaining bottle of clean Canterbury water has been auctioned off today at a protest over water quality and water rights in Christchurch. At the same time, a 15,000 signature petition was presented to opposition MPs on the steps of Parliament calling for a stop to all exports of New Zealand drinking water. Hundreds of people protested in 21 towns across the country. Our reporter Conan Young has been looking at this.
Going once, going twice, the water goes to the kids.
About 150 people looked on as veteran water rights activist Sam Mann auctioned off what was said to be Canterbury's last remaining bottle of clean drinking water outside the Canterbury Regional Council. Protest organiser Peter Richardson holds the government responsible for what he says is the poor state of the country's waterways.
The government is making it harder for people to take action under the RMA to oppose grants of consent, and the government supports 100% industrial dairying. The government has announced that its goal is to increase dairy production by 2025.
Peter Richardson says there are a number of things that need to be done urgently to help slow the degradation of the clean water people relied on for drinking and recreation.
Firstly, by price signalling, by putting a price on water. Secondly, by legislatively and in council plans placing a priority on public interest in water ahead of commercial interests.
Those protesting were concerned the public was being shut out of decisions about what happens to water in Canterbury.
My name's Liz Briggs. I'm here basically for my grandchildren because I saw the democratically elected regional councillors taken out by this government and replaced by commissioners.
They were also concerned about the state of the region's environment.
Places like Forsyth now are so toxic, you can't even take your dogs there. Dogs and stock have died by drinking the water. That's just not on. No, I just want clean water for my children, for my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren.
In Wellington, a 15,000 strong petition was presented to opposition MPs on the steps of Parliament by the organiser of the Bung the Boar campaign, Jen Brunya. She travelled the length of the South Island, gathering signatures to add to those made online. The petition calls for a moratorium on water being bottled in New Zealand and exported overseas.
Water bottlers can come here and apply for a reasonably cheap consent to take our groundwater, and our councils are granting those. Billions of litres of our water are being taken away and we get no recompense for that.
The Environment Minister Nick Smith says the water taken from aquifers and bottled represents a tiny fraction of the total amount extracted for tap water and irrigation. He says as well as having a minimal impact on the environment, it provides jobs. For Checkpoint, ko Conan Young tēnei.
Connor was in Christchurch. Let's head south. An Otago professor is warning much of South Dunedin's housing area could be underwater and uninhabitable within 17 years. Emeritus Professor Jim Flynn from Otago University today told the Dunedin City Council sea levels have accelerated to the point that almost 2,000 homes are on track to be permanently flooded by 2034. That's 3 times faster than the current predictions plan for. So, is he right, or is the good professor being alarmist? Here's our Otago Southland reporter, Ian Telfer.
Dunedin's council's been relying on official projections. Average sea levels will rise by 30 centimetres in 50 years. But Jim Flynn says that since the Greenland ice cap started melting 3 years ago, the rise has sped up dramatically, and with that, the threat to New Zealand's largest low-lying area.
We can't assume that just because sea level before 2014 rose gradually, that we can defend the area. If you do the mathematics, by about 2034, there are almost 2,000 homes in South Dunedin that will be at sea level or below.
Council reports by the consulting firm Becker previously suggested the solution could be Dutch-style drainage pumps installed in about 2040, and then an underground seawall in about 2080. Professor Flynn says that plan's absurd, and there should be a fund to help people to shift to higher ground.
Holland, you know, has a very short sea coast. Only about a fourth of the country is on the sea. New Zealand is an island, and the Dutch have invested for 4 centuries into their dikes, a huge cost. And I just don't think around New Zealand that coastal areas are going to be defensible, many of them within 17 years.
Dunedin's Mayor Dave Cull says councillors were a little stunned by Professor Flynn's presentation, and it's heightened the sense of urgency for South Dunedin. The council, together with the Otago Regional Councils, just commissioned an international review by Golder Associates to look at Dutch-style dikes and protection options. The Regional Council's Chief Executive, Peter Bodecker, says they'll look at Professor Flynn's new data. He says water's coming up through the stormwater system every spring tide, and groundwater's rising and getting worse.
Let's not try and estimate whether or not it's in the next 20 years or the next 50 years. Let's agree that it is rising, and I think that's the point that we've been trying to make.
But the director of the Antarctic Research Centre at Victoria University, Tim Naish, urges caution. He praises Jim Flynn for raising the urgency of sea level rise, but says the numbers are not credible. Professor Naish says a 25 centimetre sea level rise in 17 years is at the very high end of what's possible.
He's using an approach that a few people have used, and that is to take recent observations and then to project that trend out decades and to the end of the century. So the problem is you're taking a very short time series and you're making long-term predictions based on a very short time series.
We asked people on the street in South Dunedin's shopping area if they believe it.
It's a bit scary, I know that, but we've just got to carry on in life, and that's what life's all about.
Do you think about it? Does it worry you? It should. Just ordinary things like family crises, and which I've recently had gone through, things like that take over so much. The flooding of whatever, in so many years, just you put it on the back burner, so we do.
If you're going to do it, start doing it now, but what are we going to do? The only thing they can really do is relocate South Dunedin. And where can that go?
Yeah, we'd move to Mosgiel.
The Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, Jan Wright, says Professor Flynn's predictions could come true and communities need to start taking the threat more seriously. In Dunedin for Checkpoint, Ian Telfer.
12 minutes to 6 on Checkpoint. Here's an issue we're already getting feedback on. Should New Zealand follow Australia's lead and ban unvaccinated children from childcare centres and preschools? The Labour Party believes the proposal is worth considering, but the Health Minister says the government has no plans to move in that direction. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
Some Australian states already have no jab, no play laws, but the country's Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, has called for nationwide legislation. Vaccinating children is not a legal requirement in Australia, but failing to do so makes parents ineligible for childcare rebates. Labour's leader, Andrew Little, says while New Zealand has higher vaccination rates than Australia, they're not high enough.
We have to make sure that our vaccination programs are working and aren't being compromised by large numbers of children who are not being vaccinated. I think it's well worth looking at what we're achieving here and whether the same conditions that obviously exist in Australia apply here.
Just over 93% of New Zealand children are fully immunised at the age of 8 months. Andrew Little says while the issue isn't at the top of his list of health priorities, it is important. The Green Party co-leader Metiria Ture says she doesn't agree with the Australian policy.
We have a high vaccination rate in this country. Parents and families need more information about the benefits and the risks of vaccination in order to encourage more vaccinations if that is the purpose. But certainly punishing parents and their children is just not acceptable.
Do you support immunisations?
I do, but it's up for families to decide this for themselves. It is a family's choice whether they immunise their children or not.
Mrs Ture says she has no qualms about Labor having a look at the Australian plan.
They're entitled to have different policy from us, but it is our view that parents make these decisions, and it's up to the medical profession to make sure families have got all the information they need to make the best decision for them and their children.
The Health Minister, Jonathan Coleman, says the government has no plans to change its policy.
Because we've got very high vaccination rates, I mean they're approaching 95%. And in the end, there's always going to be a certain proportion of people who are just going to strongly resist that, getting their kids vaccinated. And I think it's actually really important that all New Zealand kids get access to early childhood education.
Jonathan Coleman says banning children from childcare and preschools would be detrimental long term. 3 Australian states, Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria, already require children to be immunised or be on an approved catch-up program to enrol in childcare centres. The Australian government, with the support of Labor, will consider making that a nationwide requirement. Atu i te whare pārimata mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Chris Bramalaho.
As Britain moves closer to leaving the European Union, Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon picked her moment to lob a grenade with a great big Scottish flag attached right into Westminster. She's announced she will seek permission for a second referendum on Scottish independence, just as the UK expects to be concluding its Brexit negotiations. But the Brits are showing no signs of compromise. Here's the BBC's James Shaw.
Nicola Sturgeon tweeted that her speech would be important. It was certainly that. Probably the most important of her career. For months, she's been warning that a hard Brexit, which didn't accommodate Scotland's interests and didn't keep the UK within the single market, would make a second independence referendum more likely.
Today, as we stand, for all we know, on the eve of Article 50 being triggered, not only is there no UK-wide agreement on the way ahead, but the UK government has not moved even an inch in pursuit of compromise and agreement. Our efforts at compromise have instead been met with a brick wall of intransigence.
So she promised to hold a referendum sometime between the second half of 2018 and spring the following year. At that point, she said, voters in Scotland would know what Brexit deal was on offer and would be entitled to choose an alternative if they wanted to.
We know that Brexit has made change inevitable. The option of no change is no longer available. However, we can still decide the nature of that change. Having Scotland's referendum at a time when the terms of Brexit are known will give the Scottish people a choice about the kind of change we want.
The alternative, she said, was the possibility of the Tories remaining in power at Westminster until 2030. She said they would try to curb the powers of the Scottish Parliament. But the mechanics of achieving a constitutionally binding vote are not straightforward. The Scottish Parliament will have to vote to seek authorisation from the UK government. With the help of the Scottish Greens, the SNP should win a vote at Holyrood next week. Then the UK government has to decide whether to give its approval. At this point, we cannot say for sure whether Scotland will get a second chance to vote for independence 4 years after the last referendum. But the signs are that it will.
Gosh, it's fascinating, isn't it? That's the BBC's James Shaw. Let's head home again. A police officer wounded in a siege near Kawerau has described the shot as a massive flash, which was followed by pain and noise. 28-year-old Rhys Warren is on trial in the High Court in Hamilton, accused of the attempted murder of 2 police officers and a number of other charges after a nearly 22-hour siege a year ago. Today, the second of 4 officers wounded in the incident gave evidence in court. And our Waikato reporter Andrew McRae was there.
Damien White was team leader as 6 armed defender squad officers made their way into the house to flush out whoever was holed up inside. As some of them made their way down the hallway, A loud bang shook the house.
I've let out an almighty bellow. Things have slowed down. I've got ringing in my ear, and I remember thinking, okay, I've been hit.
He says while it all happened in a split second, time seemed to stand still.
All my senses, it was an overload. It was a massive injection of adrenaline, and it just slowed down. So I've had it before throughout my time in the military and in other AOS jobs as well. When that fight or flight response, you get a flood of adrenaline. Your brain's working at 1,000,000 miles an hour faster than what it normally does.
Sergeant White said once he established that he could still operate effectively, he assisted another officer lying seriously injured on the floor.
I cover over him because he's now lying there, unable to protect himself. I've knelt over the top, thinking if the individual that's just fired at me is going to come around the corner and keep firing, I'm going to put my armour between that individual and Constable Mohini on the ground.
The shooting took place in what the AOS describe as the most dangerous spot in a house.
The hallway becomes what we would call a fatal funnel. It's
a fatal funnel?
Fatal funnel. So if anything happens, we're going to be trapped in a funnel. If you imagine yourself standing in a hallway and someone shines a light down the hall, anything that light touches becomes in the fatal funnel, so potentially you're in harm's way. It indicates that there's no round in the magazines or the chamber and there's nothing in it, so it's not going to fire.
Sergeant White showing his actual weapon from the day of the siege to the jury. When the shot was fired at the police, the sighting mechanism on his rifle was smashed.
So the lens has been smashed out at the rear. There's also an adjustment for up and down or left to right. It's also come off, and an end cap for turning the sight on and off has also disappeared as well.
The accused Rhys Warren's defending himself. In cross-examination, he asked Sergeant White about perception Māori have of the police.
Are you aware that a lot of Māori are fearful of the police, especially in rural areas like Onipu, due to the fact that police are known to use excessive force on local Māori like myself?
Mr. Warren, having grown up in a rural Māori community myself, I have several family members that work and live in Kawerau, Te Teko. They've never mentioned to me that they're fearful.
2 other officers wounded in the siege will be giving evidence over the next few days. In Hamilton for Checkpoint, Ko Andrew McRae-Tene.
Got a little bit of time before 6 o'clock, and we've got so much feedback tonight that we're going to bring it to you. There's a pretty broad sample. Let's look first at unvaccinated children and their access to preschool, etc. Regarding this issue, says Sarah, I find it ironic that unvaccinated children need to be banned from childcare. Surely if all the other children at the centre are vaccinated, why should there be any concern, as those children would be protected and immune by the very fact they are immunised? With Sarah's email, overwhelming support though for the idea that if you are not immunised you don't get to go. The egg issue, lots of feedback on this. Adrian from Nelson asks, how on earth can a reputable business sell a food product in all honesty when they don't know for sure of its origin or whether it truly is what it says it is? Adrian goes on, I tried to get an answer out of Pam's a year ago as to where their free-range eggs came from. They could not tell me, nor could they offer me any assurance that they were in fact free-range. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to follow this up. We are going to follow it up, Adrian, after 6 o'clock when we talk to the Egg Producers Federation at length about the guarantees you have that free-range is free-range, how we know, and all sorts of issues associated with those eggs. Curtis says the only way to guarantee free-range eggs is to get a few chickens in the backyard. This is perfectly feasible in town on a quarter acre, although if you're a caged human in a central city apartment, you might struggle. John, why can't retailers purchase eggs only from free-range poultry farmers, asks Russell. And Dave in Christchurch says, hi John, don't forget in 2001, Whedon's Poultry in Canterbury was fined $32,000 for selling cage eggs as free-range. The fine was only the retail price difference between caged and free-range, so no penalty or deterrent element. The whole free-range mess has not been cleared up 16 years later, says Dave. And in fact, we raise with the Egg Producers Federation the issue of a prosecution in Northland in 2011 when an egg farmer was, again, for about 18 months selling caged eggs as free-ranged. He, in fact, was treated quite heavily by the courts. So we will discuss all of that and more after 6 o'clock. Just before we go on, update 4 from the Wellington Central Police Station. A 44-year-old male is in custody after an item of concern was located in the foyer of Wellington Central Police Station this afternoon. Wellington Central Police and a number of other buildings in the area were evacuated as a precaution. Of course, that's where we began our program tonight, down on Victoria Street. The NZDF Explosive Ordnance Disposal Team attended and have rendered the item safe using a series of small controlled explosions. We understand there were 3 of them. Cordons have been lifted and occupants have been allowed back into the buildings. Police would like to thank the public for their patience while emergency services responded to the incident, particularly those in the buildings that were evacuated. Investigations are ongoing. The front counter will be closed while this is completed and the scene is cleared, but all other policing functions in Wellington are back to normal. It's 6 o'clock.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening, ko Katrina Batanaho. A 44-year-old man has been arrested after a suspicious item had to be blown up. A number of buildings were evacuated and a major central Wellington road was closed. The Army Bomb Disposal Team carried out 3 controlled explosions at the main police station in Wellington shortly before 5 o'clock. All cordons have been lifted and Victoria Street is now open, but the police station foyer remains closed. People evacuated have been allowed back into the surrounding buildings. At the same time, the nearby State Insurance building nearby had a scheduled trial evacuation. The building's chief warden, Shannon McLean, says it was a coincidence, but police managed the situation well.
Once we came out, we entered our evacuation procedures and came across the police who were actually evacuating their building at the same time. They advised us to move down out of the zone that they were occupying as cordon.
Shannon McLean says State Insurance staff waited about an hour and a half before being allowed back in the building. The owner of a company being investigated by the Serious Fraud Office denies they ever knowingly sold caged eggs as free-range eggs. Palace Poultry says Eco Foods sold them caged eggs as free-range and they then on-sold them in good faith. Countdown pulled Palace Poultry eggs from its shelves yesterday after an investigation by the new website Newsroom concluded that millions of the brand's eggs sold before this year were probably cage-laid but labelled as free-range. The owner of Eco Foods, Robert Heheworth, says he's only ever sold caged eggs to Palace Poultry. But Palace Poultry's owner, Terry Fletcher, says he was always told by Eco Foods the eggs were free-range.
We've got photos of the product being picked up in free-range wrappers and bits and pieces, and we're led to believe by this turkey that's what we were purchasing, and we on-sold them in good faith, and now it's turned around and bit us in the arse.
Terry Fletcher from Palace Poultry. A murderer who wants to spend the rest of his life in prison has been told he doesn't have to keep hurting people to achieve his goal. Stephen Roger Williams is serving a life sentence for murdering his 6-year-old stepdaughter, Coral Ellen Burrows, in 2003. And today he received another sentence of preventive detention. Edward Gay reports.
The court heard how Williams attacked fellow inmate and murderer Nicky Roper after luring him to a cell. He stabbed Roper with broken fluorescent light bulbs and a broken broom handle before guards could pull him away. Williams told authorities he wanted to remain in prison. Justice Kit Toogood said health assessors found Williams posed a high risk to the public of reoffending. He sentenced Williams to preventive detention, meaning Williams will have to prove he's no longer a danger to the community before he's let out of prison. I tāmaki Makoto ko Edward Gay aho.
The government has no plans to follow Australia's lead and consider banning unvaccinated children from childcare centres and preschools. Some Australian states already have no jab, no play laws, but the country's Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull has called for nationwide legislation. The Health Minister Jonathan Coleman says the government here is not planning to change its policy.
Because we've got very high vaccination rates, I mean they're approaching 95%. And in the end, there's always going to be a certain proportion of people who are just going to strongly resist that, getting their kids vaccinated. And I think it's actually really important that all New Zealand kids get access to early childhood education.
Jonathan Coleman. An Auckland car wash company owned by a former rugby league star has been ordered to pay out $35,000 to migrant staff after an investigation found it breached employment law. Ministry of Business, Employment and Innovation inspectors say Cafe, owned by the former Warriors player Matthew Ridge, didn't correctly employ and pay 97 people. Jacob McSweeney reports.
The Labour Inspectorate's regional manager, Lua Ward, says the company failed in the basics of being an employer. It didn't provide correct holiday pay, keep proper wage, time and holiday records, or provide employment agreements. The investigation found 37 workers were not given employment agreements, 13 were given 90-day trial letters in place of contracts, and another 6 had contracts with no dates. Carfei was ordered in October to correct its mistakes and pay the arrears owed to the workers, which it has now done. Ko Jacob McSweeney, Tēnei.
A 15,000-strong petition was presented to opposition MPs on the steps of Parliament this afternoon, calling for a ban on exports of bottled water. The Bung the Boar campaign began when the Ashburton District Council tried to sell land with a water consent to a bottled water company. The petition calls for a moratorium on water being bottled and exported overseas until restrictions are put in place. The Environment Minister, Nick Smith, says the water taken from aquifers for bottling represents a tiny fraction of the total amount extracted for tap water and irrigation. It's 6:05. To sport, and the New Zealand rally driver Hayden Paddon is parting ways with his long-time co-driver John Kennard. The pair have worked together since 2005. Last year, Kennard became the oldest co-driver at 57 to win a World Rally Championship event when he and Paddon won a rally at Rally Argentina. Kennard's final rally will be in Finland in July. Despite being swathed in covers for the past 5 days, the Basin Reserve pitch is in good shape ahead of the second cricket test between New Zealand and South Africa. Basin turf manager Hagan Faith says over 70 millimetres of rain has fallen in Wellington since Friday, and despite it affecting their preparations, it hasn't set them back too much.
Grass heights, look, we're happy with where that is. We gave it a mow this morning just to tidy it up really, but yeah, everything's where it should be.
Basin Reserve turf manager Hagan Faith. Troubled Warriors playmaker Kieran Foran will have to wait till at least another week to return to the National Rugby League competition. Despite passing his final psychological assessment last week, Foran has been left out of the Warriors side to play the Bulldogs in Dunedin on Friday. The 26-year-old hasn't fully recovered from a shoulder reconstruction. And Hurricanes fullback Nehemiah Scudder will be out of Super Rugby for 6 weeks after scans revealed he broke his foot during his side's loss to the Chiefs on Saturday. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Alexandra Stein on cults and how to spot them. She should know she found herself trapped in one a couple of decades back. She managed to escape, but she's a bit worried the United States may have elected a cult leader for president. Well, this week's pundit, our mathematician Dylan Mayhew, remembers Kenneth Arrow, who died last month, who had a few things to say about how hard it is to create the perfect voting system. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Kapiti, also Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Cloudy periods and a few showers, becoming fine this evening or tomorrow morning. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy with showers becoming isolated tomorrow evening. Wellington and Wairarapa, cloudy periods and a few showers, clearing tomorrow afternoon. Buller, Nelson and Marlborough, except for the Kaikoura coast, cloudy periods and isolated showers becoming fine this afternoon. Westland and Fiordland mostly fine, the Kaikoura coast and Canterbury cloudy with a few showers, becoming fine tomorrow morning. Otago and Southland, cloudy periods and isolated coastal showers becoming fine tomorrow morning, and the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, a few showers clearing tomorrow morning. It is 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Lots on eggs tonight. Earlier in Checkpoint, we heard from Palace Poultry emphatically denying that they knowingly sold caged eggs as free-range eggs. We also heard their supplier, Robert Heheworth, say he sold them caged eggs as caged eggs. Now, the Serious Fraud Office is investigating what happened at Palace Poultry. This is very much ongoing. But Countdown yesterday removed Palace Poultry eggs from its shelves. Our producer, Bridget Burke, asked James Walker from Countdown when it first heard from the Serious Fraud Office.
The Serious Fraud Office had got in contact with us initially at the beginning of February. At that time, they asked us some very specific questions, and we were not made aware of the breadth or seriousness of the allegations. It wasn't until the story broke that we had that information. If these allegations turn out to be true, They've deceived us and they've deceived our customers, which is completely unacceptable.
What do you understand to be the allegations?
Palace Poultry have allegedly been providing caged eggs and marketing them as free-range eggs. This is completely unacceptable to us, and we are investigating this ourselves.
Would they be of all the free-range eggs that you carry at the lower end of price point?
We have a range of free-range eggs at different price points. So we've taken the Palace Poultry eggs off our shelves as soon as we were made aware of these allegations, and we are able to source free-range eggs from other suppliers to make sure that we have stock for customers.
So you weren't concerned at the point at which the SFO contacted you to ask questions about those particular eggs? You were quite comfortable to keep them on the shelves and selling?
At the time the SFO contacted us, we were asked some very specific questions, and it did not give us rise to be concerned about whether or not the eggs were free range. It could have been any number of things.
Have you ever received any feedback from customers concerned about consistency or quality around Palace eggs?
As far as I'm aware, we have never received any customer feedback around the quality of Palace Poultry eggs with respect to them being free range or cage.
You are still stocking Woodland eggs?
So Woodland Eggs have informed us that they stopped taking eggs from Palace Poultry in February. They have provided us undertakings today that all of their free-range eggs are coming from verified farms, and we are sending our own independent auditor to Mainland tomorrow to verify this.
That's James Walker from Countdown talking to our producer Bridget Burke. Now, if these allegations turn out to be true, was one of the things he said. While the Serious Fraud Office is investigating what happened at Palace, no charges have been laid. In the absence of charges, there's certainly no guilt established. But in 2014, guilt was established. A Northland egg producer, Forest Hill Farm, was selling cage eggs as free range. Its owner, John Garnett, was charged. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 12 months home detention and 200 hours community service. At the time, he claimed the practice was widespread. That was angrily rejected by the Egg Producers Federation, who called Garnett a rogue. I quote, "Consumers can be confident that this sort of thing isn't happening." Well, less than 3 years after that assurance, the Serious Fraud Office is investigating whether something similar has indeed occurred. So we asked Michael Brooks, CEO of the Egg Producers Federation, what he makes of the accusations and revelations of the past 2 days.
Oh, look, we really feel betrayed as an industry. That's the comment I've had from a number of farmers. I know consumers will be upset, but I can assure you so are farmers as well by the actions of this one individual.
Right, the actions of this one individual. You said exactly the same thing after John Garnett was found to have been doing a similar kind of thing, and of course nothing has been proven here against Palace. So let's set that aside.
Sure.
Between April 2010 and November 2011, John Garnett's Forest Hill Farm packaged cage eggs in cartons labelled free range. He made an additional $376,000 as a result of doing so. You described that at the time as rogue.
Yes.
We've got to now begin to suspect that actually no one knows how common this is.
Well, we believe we do know. At the time, your listeners need to understand, Garnett was brought to justice by the industry. We learned of his actions, we reported him to the Commerce Commission.
After 18 months of passing off cage eggs as free range.
Sure, so he was misleading, but once we learned that something was happening and we worked through the system, we brought him to justice in terms of that. I have to say, in case of this individual, this one seems to have been a complete surprise.
And once again, we must repeat, this is an allegation and nothing is proven in the Serious Fraud Office.
That's the allegation.
Okay.
So look, following the Garnett case, we've looked at a couple of options. One was a scientific option where you do isotope testing, done by an organisation called Oratane down in Mosgiel, ex-Otago University scientists. We've trialled that, quite a complex and detailed process, and it looked in many respects promising, but at the end of the day, it didn't give, well, for the certainty of farmers, it didn't give 100%. And so we've moved to the option, and we're well advanced on it, of stamping eggs individually. I can tell you that I actually did a paper for the board only a few weeks ago at the last board meeting, and they instructed me at that meeting to continue on that.
Okay, so wait a sec. So forgive me for interrupting, but John Garnett was doing that between April 2010 and April 2011. He was sentenced, I think, in August 2014. At the time, you said in a statement from the Egg Producers Federation, and I quote, "We have also taken steps to ensure more stringent traceability processes."
Yes, and we did. We developed a new audit profile. I can actually send you that more detailed audit system. We sent that to farmers. We discussed it with MPI as well, and we said, look, this is a more detailed audit document.
Has it been implemented?
Yeah, oh well, it's certainly been sent out to farmers, and farmers have been using it. So,
Is it voluntary?
Well, yes, it's part of the audit process, so it's voluntary. But
sorry, you said we have also taken steps to ensure more stringent traceability processes, plural. So there's a voluntary audit. What else did you do?
So that was part of the audit process that we put in place. We certainly talked to farmers about the option, and we looked at this Auckland scheme. We had to trial that. We've trialled that a couple of times.
So in real terms, you know, where the rubber hits the road, you've actually done nothing, right?
No, I think that's very unfair, John. We have done that audit system. If you have a determined individual who wants to subvert the system, then they can do that. That's why we like looking at the idea now of egg stamping, because they can't subvert the documentation.
Okay, when do you think egg stamping will be a reality? In other words, when do you think consumers will be able to look at an egg and see that it is actually explicitly free range?
Okay, so I can't give a timeline because there's some complexities. I'll just explain what we're looking to do. So on the egg would be stamped a specific ID, because every farm has a specific ID, and then it would have a number, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and say 1 would be free range, 2 would be barn, 3 cage, etc. And from that would be done on the farm at the time of packing. So in this case, it's alleged that the person purchased cage eggs but then represented them as free range. If they'd purchased those cage eggs, they would have had a stamp on them, wouldn't have been able to pack them in a free-range carton.
But this is still hypothetical, right? When do you think this will be happening?
Well, we're working through all the complexities of it. Look, there is big cost here. It can cost a six-figure sum in terms of the machinery. For the little free-range farmers, they don't have that machinery, so we've got to look at hand stamps, etc. So, and we don't want to put cost on. There will be cost to farmers. So we've got to look at that. We're working through those.
Absolutely, but people are paying extra for free-range eggs, aren't they? I mean, you can get a cage egg for less than half the price of a free-range egg in some examples, and people are paying more because they have animal welfare considerations. Sure. They're paying more because actually they like the thought that the hen is having a quality of life. Now, if people are paying more and if people are charged more, isn't there an onus on you, on the industry, to absolutely guarantee that people are getting what they're paying for?
Yes, totally agree with you, John, and we are looking to do that. We trialled the extra audit processes. Clearly, as this case would seem to show, if a determined individual wants to subvert a system, then that can be done. So we've looked at the options, and egg stamping is the one that we are
so for someone sitting in their car tonight listening to this, or at home who's just about to crack an egg and cook it for their evening dinner, for whatever, whether they're putting it in baking or whatever they're making, how do you absolutely guarantee that the free-range egg you've purchased is free-range?
Well, we have just got to put as many systems in place that will prevent a lone individual, 1 out of 126 farmers, from doing something that subverts the system.
Okay, sorry, can you answer my question though, Michael? I'm so sorry to be insistent. How can you guarantee that the free-range egg you've purchased, which you paid extra money for, is actually free-range?
Well, can you prove anything is 100%? What we can do is what we have on-farm audits through the Ministry for Primary Industries.
Right, so you can't, so at the moment, sorry Michael, at the moment your industry and your producers are saying that you can't, as a consumer, you can't be guaranteed that the egg you're purchasing as free range is in fact free range.
We're taking every possible step to do it, but if an individual in this case wants to subvert the system, we can only, we can just continue to look at every option to try and prevent that from happening. I can say to your listeners that we work extremely hard on this. This is a case where wherever we hear of any suggestion of wrongdoing, we take all possible steps for checks to be made.
It was Michael Brooks from the Egg Producers Federation. We're getting so much feedback on this. This is quite a long email from Derek, but we're going to read it out. I regularly shop at Countdown, and I've used their Loyalty One card for most of my purchases there for at least 15 years. For several years, I bought Palace eggs because I wanted to eat only free-range eggs. So that was the kind of consideration we were talking about with Michael there. Now, Countdown tell us they're no longer selling them because Palace have been mixing caged eggs in with the free-range eggs. Once again, this is still being determined by the Serious Fraud Office. The way I see it, Derek goes on, Countdown owe me compensation for selling me eggs that were incorrectly labelled because I've used the One card regularly, which they used to collect data for marketing purposes. They'll know exactly when and where I bought Palace eggs and should be able to compensate me directly for the eggs I've been sold. So come on, Countdown, get granular with the data you've been collecting and pay up to all those loyal customers, says Derek. Thank you, Derek. The time is 6:20. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. The message to save water in Auckland or face having to boil it has suddenly become blurred with a missed target being called good news. Aucklanders are told to cut back their water usage for the next 3 weeks after landslips contaminated water dams, halving the input from the Henua storage lakes. The council's water company wants daily consumption cut to below 400 million litres a day. But yesterday it spiked up to 419 million litres. That's a failure, right? Our Auckland correspondent Todd Niall reports.
Aucklanders took up the call at the end of last week, shortening showers and getting weekend daily consumption below the 400 million litre target. Watercare's Chief Executive Ravin Jadaram told a media briefing that yesterday's overshoot was still a good result. I asked him whether the savings message was getting blurred.
No, I'm saying that 400 is still the target. The message will get blurred depending on how you get the message out on our behalf, right? I'm just being transparent and open. I'm saying that any reduction by the community is good. So yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in the messaging and I'm not trying to spin it. I'm just being very honest.
In short, behind the scenes, the savings target is shifting every day, and as long as reservoirs around the city can be filled overnight, all is well. Auckland has 5 major sources of water, but the Henua Range catchment, which feeds the Ardmore treatment plant, makes up 2/3 of the supply. It's currently running at half its normal capacity. Ravin Jadaram says Auckland's water network doesn't meet a standard called N-1, meaning it can't meet the city's normal demand if any one of its supplies is knocked out. I asked whether the city's councillors knew that.
No, I don't know the councillors, no, because you're asking me to speak on behalf of councillors, which I can't. But N-1 standards for the water system elsewhere in the world wouldn't be common either.
Auckland's Mayor, Phil Goff.
Well, I certainly wasn't aware of it.
Mr Goff says once the current problems are sorted, there should be a look at whether the supply standard of coping with a 1 in 100 year drought is enough.
You can have 2 1 in 100 events in successive years, and I think that water is so fundamental to a city that we need to make sure that we have got the resilience in the system that enables us to cope.
Watercare hopes to gradually lift the output from Ardmore over the next 3 weeks and says most but not all of the city's biggest users are making cuts.
Some of them will struggle, depending on, so we've started asking for the savings, and some of them are running production plants, depending on what they've got. The message is there still that we want the demand to be retained at lower levels.
Sky City, which has 2 downtown hotels, says it cut water use by 10% by reducing flows to more than 600 hotel rooms. Fire hydrant testing company Novatech is postponing a lot of testing, cutting use by 43,000 litres a week. Investigations of 2 of the worst flood-hit areas during the weekend's deluge are continuing, with the Auckland Council saying it's still not safe enough to enter a collapsed culvert in New Lynn. It will talk to the owner of a block of flood-damaged flats in Kelston, which sit in a designated flood-prone area, to discuss the future of the property. E tamaki makoro mo te hōtaka o te ahi ko Todd Niall tēnei.
From Auckland and its water to a UK government bill to allow the Prime Minister Theresa May to begin negotiating the Brexit process. which has cleared its final hurdle in the British Parliament. The EU withdrawal bill has passed unamended after the House of Lords voted overwhelmingly not to challenge the House of Commons again over the issue of whether Parliament should have a veto on the terms of exit. Boy, this is complicated. Some would say willfully so. Here's the BBC's Chris Mason.
There have voted contents 118, not contents 274. So the not contents have it.
Almost 2 months on from the Supreme Court judgment compelling the government to secure parliamentary approval before starting the Brexit process, tonight ministers achieved it. The House of Lords acknowledged the supremacy of the Commons as the elected chamber and rejected the Second Amendment to the Brexit bill it had backed just last week on setting down in law a meaningful vote in Parliament after the Brexit negotiations. Almost an hour earlier, it had also rejected its earlier suggestion to guarantee the rights of EU citizens in the UK. The Labour peer and shadow Brexit Minister Lady Hayter told peers securing their future here was vital, as was continuing to scrutinise the government as the negotiations got underway.
We will also campaign for an early resolution to the plight of those caught up in a legal Neverland not of their making. And we will continue to press the government to move on this and to provide the certainty our amendment sought.
Watching the debate in the Lords, the Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, David Davis. Earlier, he told the Commons why he thought rejecting the amendments was important.
As we embark on the forthcoming negotiations, our guiding approach is simple. We will not do anything which will undermine the national interest, including the interests of British citizens living in the European Union, and we will not enter the negotiations with our hands tied. This is not to say I do not appreciate the concerns that lie behind these amendments. It's not the ends we disagree on, but the means.
Most MPs and peers agreed. There was next to no rebellion from Conservatives in the Commons. In a statement after the final vote in the Lords, Mr Davis said the UK now stood on what he called the threshold of the most important negotiation for our country in a generation. The Brexit bill will very soon be law, empowering the Prime Minister to begin the process of leaving the European Union. That won't happen this week, but it will happen this month.
The report from the BBC. A self-described geek girl superhero flew into Dunedin today in a bid to inspire more girls and young women to follow in her tech-savvy footsteps. Women only make up 15% of the IT workforce in New Zealand, a woefully low number that's not only not increasing, in fact, female student numbers in some tech tertiary courses are dropping. Otago Southland reporter Lydia Anderson went to meet Janine Bakehausen, aka Juella, today.
In an ordinary room at Otago Polytechnic, female high school students were discovering how to become a superhero. A captive audience of about 40 computer science students listened as Dr. Janine Bakehausen invited them to join their Australian peers in the Tech Girl movement. St Hilda's Collegiate Year 10 student Branwyn Jones says she never thought as a girl she could have a career in IT.
In movies and stuff, it's normally a man who's got glasses and that's typical image, but our teacher started introducing it to us this year and she's really keen and she's helping us become more enthusiastic and coming to places like this as well. It just helps you see it's actually not just sitting down and you can get involved.
Her classmate Bella Devereux, who's keen to use tech as part of a medical career, says young women shouldn't be discouraged from studying IT.
There's lots of opportunities out there and you should take every chance you get to see what other things you can do, because I think a lot of us today had no idea what this was all about and I think a lot of us are really considering it as a career now.
Dr. Bakehausen will formally invite Kiwi schoolgirls to enter the Australian Tech Girl Superhero competition at a sold-out event later this week in Auckland. She says if you want to encourage women to take up IT careers, you need to intervene early.
Girls actually opt out of technology around 6 years old. That's when the stereotypes start to kick in, and it's not cool to be in tech, it's not cool to be smart. So they want to do something that's normal and cool. And technology just isn't normal in terms of a career and something that's really practical for them to do.
And she says it's beneficial for companies to employ female tech workers.
There is evidence that diversity breeds better decision making. So having more diversity, and not just women, but having all types of minorities represented at the development table actually is good for business. It results in better financial performance for companies, better company reputation, better board performance. You're more likely to get a patent accepted and cited if you have a woman on the team, something like 40% more likely to get your patent cited by having a woman on the team.
At Otago Polytechnic, the number of female students enrolling in tech courses is dropping. Its head of Enterprise and Development, Leslie Smith, says it comes down to young women's perceptions of IT as being a male-orientated industry.
They don't even apply. We will take them if they apply, because the girls who do come through the schools with IT skills are great and they've got lots of skills, but somewhere through their years of growing up they are losing their passion for computing. And they see it, when you talk to them, they clearly see it as something that boys can do and that they're doing other things.
Leslie Smith says initiatives such as the Tech Girl competition are needed to turn that perception around. The Australian Tech Girl competition is open to female high school students in New Zealand who can form teams to design an app with the guidance of a female tech mentor. The teams can then enter their app in a worldwide competition. In Dunedin for Checkpoint, Lydia Anderson.
Thank you, Lydia. Lovely story. Just before we go tonight, Ewan Mason, who is a professor of the School of Forestry at the University of Canterbury, says there's a really good way of tracing eggs all the way through, and it exists in forestry. It's the environmental certification in forestry, and there's no impediment to setting it up in the egg production industry. Good suggestion. We will look at that over the week. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. Thank you for your feedback. We will be back tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A 44-year-old man has been arrested after a suspicious item had to be blown up at the main police station, buildings evacuated and a major road closed in central Wellington. The owner of a company being investigated by the Serious Fraud Office denies they ever knowingly sold caged eggs as free-range eggs. A man who murdered his young stepdaughter in 2003, who wants to spend the rest of his life in prison, has been told he doesn't have to keep hurting people to achieve it. The government has no plans to follow Australia's lead and consider banning unvaccinated